So, today I want to talk a little bit more about your food sensitivities and really why it's so important to dive into figuring out what your individual food sensitivities are. And so, one of the things that I hear a lot is I did a food sensitivity test, but I'm still hurting. Like I've taken these foods out and this is what it came up with. I have 20 different food sensitivities. I've taken them all out of my diet and I'm still having symptoms. So this happens a lot. And so I want to talk a little bit also about the about food sensitivity test and the role that I think that they um, where they can be helpful, but also where they can be limiting when it comes to figuring out your food sensitivity triggers, which are the things that individually trigger you and cause symptoms in your body. So, food sensitivity tests can be helpful if someone has a test and we can kind of gather some clues maybe and look at different patterns of the foods that their body was reacting to when they had that test. So we can kind of pick up on some patterns and then it can lead us um, in how we do an elimination challenge diet. So for those of you who aren't familiar with elimination challenge diets, basically it means removing certain foods and then you add them back in one at a time and you notice reactions. And there's a real specific way to do this. And as you observe how your body responds to each food, you will get more and more clear on what is triggering you, what's causing symptoms, and what foods are serving you well. So that is the gold standard for figuring out your food sensitivities, is going through that process of elimination and challenging. Now, food sensitivity tests, I understand, can seem really appealing to a lot of people because you just go and you do this blood draw or these different testing methods and you get the results and then there you go, you have your food sensitivities. And if it worked out that way, it would be amazing. You know, we could all just have this test done, and although it costs a little bit of money, it would save a lot of stress and a lot of guesswork, and a lot of the trial and error. But what happens with these tests is a lot of times they are inconclusive, so they leave out foods that are causing you symptoms that but it's not showing up on the test. So you can have foods that your body just doesn't break down well. You can have foods that your body responds, that your immune system responds to, and you actually create antibodies to. And so every time you eat that food, your body has an immune reaction. But there's other foods that you can be eating as well that just aren't being broken down and aren't being digested properly because maybe you don't have the right enzymes or you don't have enough stomach acid or whatever it is. You need all these components of your digestive system to be working properly and have the right amounts of these different things that help you break your food down. So when that's not happening, you can have food intolerance as well as sensitivities. And a lot of that's not going to show up on a food sensitivity test. And so the other thing that can happen is I have seen people go and have a test and get one list of things come up and then have another test and have a different list of things come up. And maybe some of them overlap, but then there's differing things coming up on these two tests within a short period of time. So the test can be really telling for what's going on with you, but just in a nutshell, it can also leave out a lot of things. And what I see happen is I have clients or different people that I talk to have taken out foods that maybe their body's not even reacting to, and so your diet becomes more and more limited. As your diet is more limited, you're eating more and more of the same foods often instead of rotating your foods as much. So what can happen with that is you can develop new food sensitivities because you're overloading your body and putting this food consistently into a system that has issues, maybe with the intestinal lining, foods getting into the bloodstream, and new sensitivities can emerge. So in a nutshell, and just in a really simple way of explaining that, is just you can develop more food sensitivities from eating a very narrow, very restricted diet. And when your gut is dysfunctional, it's much more likely for that to happen. So we want to be cautious with that. I don't want you to take out foods that are actually serving you well, because it limits the variety in your diet and limits your ability to rotate your foods. And then what happens often is we load up on these other foods that maybe our body is responding to even more. So then there's that piece where if the test is missing something, if it's missing different foods that you're reacting to, then you're loading up on these foods that are actually causing you symptoms, thinking that you're doing the right thing for your body. So just to kind of lay that out, there can be some really useful, a food sensitivity test. If somebody comes to me and they've already had one, then we'll use that information to the best of our ability, but we still go through this process of eliminating and challenging food so we can figure out specifically what's causing your symptoms, what's making you feel bad, what's zapping your energy. And then on the other hand, we can look at what foods are serving you well. What do you feel good when you eat? What gives you energy? What makes you feel vibrant and healthy and like yourself, versus what makes you feel like you're not comfortable in your own skin, increases your anxiety, gives you headaches, all these things. So it's really this process of going through with a fine-tooth comb and figuring out these are the foods that work for you and these are the foods that aren't. And another really important thing I think to be aware of is that you can't rule anything out. I have seen people react to everything from pineapple to spinach to sweet potatoes to chia seeds to nuts and seeds, all different kinds of foods. People can be reacting to food chemicals in meat that accumulate over time. People can be reacting to more of a plant-based kind of diet or a vegan diet. So there's no one protocol that's going to work for anybody. And so the most effective way to figure out your food sensitivities and the foods that are triggering you is going through this process of eliminating and challenging foods. And so knowing what foods are safe, because you can't eat nothing when you go into that, right? But we've got to get you back to a baseline. Each person needs to know what their baseline is. So you need to know, where do I feel good? And then as you start adding foods back in, noticing what happens. And so really going through that process with a fine-tooth comb and figuring out for you what serves you well, what triggers you, is super, super important. And then when we take that and bring in these other pieces that if you listen, if you listen to my other videos, I talk a lot about stress and listening to the messages your body is sending you, and environmental toxins and these other pieces that come in and play a role in the stress that's on your body and on your gut. And so, each of these pieces that I'm talking about is a way to remove the stress and remove the barriers that are preventing you from healing and from your body being able to come back into balance. So figuring out your food sensitivities is one, your food triggers and your food, the foods that serve you well. That's one piece of this puzzle, and it's a super, super important piece, because as you start to figure those out, your body will have the space it needs to begin to heal and repair itself. And so you can put more attention into some of these underlying causes, these other things that are putting stress on your gut and your body, and really give yourself the space to heal. And I want that so much for you. When I was able to really take control of my food sensitivities and really feel in control of my symptoms, it changed my life in such a big way and elevated my life in so many ways and on so many levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like, all of these areas really will take off as you start to figure out what's serving you well and what's triggering you. So, if you want more support in this area, this is exactly what I do, is help people figure out what is triggering you and what's serving you well in the areas of food and stress and, the different environmental components, identifying different environmental stressors on your body, on your gut. So if you want help figuring out for you what those things are that serve you well and what it is that is triggering you and causing your relentless and uncomfortable digestive symptoms and limiting you in so many ways with food and freedom and, symptoms holding you down. It's such a restricted way to live. And I just want you to know that you don't have to stay there and that there are things that you can do to feel so much better. So if you want that support, let me know. Write yes in the comments below. And I'm happy to reach out and take the time to chat with you and help you come up with a plan to move past these areas that you're stuck in. One other thing I wanted to tell you about is I just finished a free training, and I will put the link below this video as well, but it's leahvong.com/webinar. So it's LEAHV as in Victor ONG.com/webinar. And I have a free training that talks about the steps that, the key steps that helped me so much, that helped my clients so much, and that you need to take to really be in control of your food sensitivities and your symptoms. So if you're interested in that, go and sign up for that free webinar. And there's great information in there that will help you on this path to taking control. So leahvong.com/webinar, and check it out. There's some really good information, and it may just give you the insight that you need to kind of get rolling on your journey and start to really find relief. So, all right. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. I'll see you next week.